Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Cheers. Wrong coffee. So I have a couple good things that I've read recently that I want to catch you up on. I want to share with you Handful of Dust. I still don't know how I'm going to talk about it. It's a really unique reading experience, but I do want to say that I could not be enjoying the Thomas Cromwell read-along that Simon Hassel from Footnotes and Tangents hosts. He's the one that also hosts the War and Peace read-along. So this is the first book. Then I think that is the second book, Bring Up the Bodies, but I'm mentioning it because without his weekly backgrounds or context, I would not be enjoying it half as much. So, and my mother is rereading this and really enjoying Simon's posts, which you can get through his Instagram account, and then you can delve in further on his Substack. I mention it because we're going to move on to the next one. So if you've already read this and you've never read Bring Up the Bodies or whatever the second book is in the series, then there's plenty of time to join in because we're reading like 30 pages a week. So you'll be able to join in if you sign up for his newsletter or email or whatever. I didn't know whether I'm going to read the next one because this is like a time frame like way out of my ordinary preferable time frame. So we'll see. But so far, like, it's really great. I'm also reading on my own, like a few chapters a day in the morning. I'm reading Anna Karenina, and I just wanted to share with everybody, don't spoil anything for me, but I just wanted to share since I'm 186 pages in, and in this edition, it means I'm on chapter 18 of part 2. I'm really attracted to the storyline of Vronsky. No, the storyline of Levin and Kitty and Stepan Arkadievich and his wife. I think his wife's name is Dolly. I'm interested in all the characters except Anna Karenina and Vronsky a little bit, but like I find those characters so far in the story like less interesting than the others. I don't know if that's what Tolstoy has in mind. Are we supposed to be ambivalent about Anna? I don't want any of these questions answered. I'm just wondering out loud. This is where I'm at in the story. I just wanted to mark it so that the next time I talk about where I'm at, then we'll see. We'll see. So I just wanted to let you know my impressions so far. Very interesting. Okay, A Handful of Dust. The only thing, like, I don't read the blurbs of books very often, and when I see if I'm starting to read one and it's going into too much detail, then I just stop. I often just read the first couple sentences. And this one, it doesn't have a blurb on the back. I mean, this is a 1950s Penguin. It has this little blurb, and I didn't pay too much attention to it. It really wasn't. It was just something about, after 7 years of marriage, Lady Brenda was mildly bored with country life in the Victorian Gothic mansion that was the symbol of her husband's pride. It does say later that the story becomes a vortex of ironic calamities. Yes. The reason for the title comes from the poem The Wasteland. I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning, striding behind you, or your shadow at evening, rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. So I take from that, now that I read the story, that the tiniest thing, the thing that might feel to you as if it's tiny in the whole larger scheme of things, can lead to a vortex of calamity. And it's interesting because this book starts off with a character named Mrs. Beaver and her very lazy son, who doesn't have any money of his own, goes out and just make sure that he's at the right, he's got a name because of his dad and his mother, that he can get into clubs, like society clubs in London, but he can't pay for anything. So he has to hope that somebody shows up, and he somehow very snidely gets someone to pay for a drink. He's that kind of guy. He's allowed to just laze around. Mrs. Beaver is a widow, and she has an interior decorating company. She's also somebody who wants her son in certain circles, and she kind of teaches him ways of doing that. But anyway, we get to meet Brenda and Tony last, who are people that have moved to, Brenda, I think, is used to London, and they have moved to Tony's family estate called, I'm pronouncing it Hetton. And it's an old English Gothic castle that's cold, and everything needs remodeled and redone. And he can't do it all at once, so they're doing it slowly. He is, landed gentry, and they're not super wealthy. They've got enough money, or his family gives him money to be doing this, redoing the house. But they're the kind of people where Brenda, when she goes to London, which she likes to do once a week, she'll take the Wednesday train and third class so that it doesn't cost a whole lot of money. And she usually stays with her sister, so she doesn't need to pay to stay overnight if she does. But usually she comes and goes all in one day. She somehow comes into the orbit of someone. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because part of the wonder of this book was figuring out what in the heck was going on. Like, what is this book about? And why is Brenda being driven to do the things that she's doing? Because we don't see any unhappiness really, other than we know she doesn't really want to be at Hetton. She has a son, by the way. He's about 7. And you're not really understanding why she's all of a sudden driven to be in London and be doing the things that she's doing. The things that she's doing aren't totally looked down upon in society as long as you're smart about it. I'll just put it that way. But the thing that I really liked about this is this book is all about the showing and not telling. So things are happening, you're not really given the context. It's really up to you to figure this out and make your own decisions about it. There aren't easy answers served up. You're going to just keep having questions. Even when a calamity happens, the way that people behave around that calamity are somewhat unexpected, mostly Brenda. And then this calamity leads to a huge fissure between Brenda and Tony. And that roller coaster just keeps going and goes out of control. I just really enjoyed, even though I just could never understand where this story was going, Evelyn Waugh really lets you do the work. And I really enjoyed that. This is a book that starts in London with the scene with Mrs. Beaver and her son. It then goes to Hetton, which is in the countryside. And it ends up in Brazil. I won't explain that. I'm not going to give anything away because, again, I felt like the joy of this ride was not knowing. And, it was frustrating at times because I kind of felt like I didn't care about anybody or what was happening because you're not given the context of people's actions. But I don't know. I think as a whole, after I've now read the book, I'm really glad that I read it, and I am looking forward to reading more of Evelyn Waugh. Which will be for me Brideshead Revisited. So please share your experience of the book down below without spoiling. Don't give anything away for anyone else. I know Leo from Leo's Little Life. This is one of his favorite books, so I do want to hear your thoughts on it. I'm looking at deer out of the window who are staring at me because they're in the yard, and it's just so beautiful. Okay, onward. So I had to take a trip, a short trip last week, and I chose to take with me. So after A Handful of Dust, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to read. I just don't know. So I picked off of my shelf an Anita Bruckner that I think this is one of the ones that I bought when I was in Florida with my kids. We go to this place that has used books all the time. So this is called Undue Influence, and it centers around Claire Pitt. So I'm forgetting about what this was about already. So it centers around Claire Pitt, who's got, an ordinary life. She has a best friend whose name I'm now forgetting. And they meet, and I don't even remember how, a guy named Martin and his chronically ill wife, Cynthia. And she and her best friend are asked to go and drop in. Oh, I know. She works at a kind of like a bookstore, and she's researching the two owners, their sisters, researching their father's works or something. And Martin pops into the bookstore, and they get to know each other, and she is asked to go visit Cynthia, his wife, and he, and they do that. And then his wife, the chronically ill wife, dies, and so on and so on. It was all right. It's not the best and most interesting book that Bruckner I've read. I'll just say that. And then I got out of the library for this trip a Muriel Spark, because I love a Muriel Spark, so why not? What I don't like are these covers. I think this is actually New Directions from a while ago. And the driver's seat was done in this kind of weirdness cover. But this is called Loitering with Intent, and it's about Fleur is looking for a job. She finds a job working for this association, the Autobiographical Association, led by this guy who charges a fee for handpicked people to get together and write their autobiography, and Fleur is going to help edit the autobiographies. And the whole story centers around the characters in this circle of the association members, the person running the association, Claire, Fleur's on again, off again, hook up with some guy. I read half of it, and then I just said to myself, so I took it on the trip, I was reading it there in the evening for a little bit, and then I just stopped reading. I wasn't interested at all. I didn't keep on going. So there you go. A DNF halfway through of this 186-page book. When I got home, I continued reading Absolution by Alice McDermott. This is a book I had like a couple months ago out of the library, and I started reading it. I got to like page 30 something. I was really enjoying what I was reading, but it just got crowded out. And I took it back to the library. And then I watched Matthew Sciarappa's Best Books of 2023. And this is on there. And he reminded me about how just wonderful the writing is in this book. I've never read an Alice McDermott. So I got it back out. I had started reading it before the trip. I continued reading it. You know, it's funny. I was reading it, and the first half is written by Trisha, and you see that she's writing to one of her friend's daughters. Her friend has passed away, Charlene. Yeah, this is 60 years later, spurred by an encounter with an aging Vietnam vet. Charlene's daughter reaches out to Trisha, and then they start trading communications, I guess. And I guess we're supposed to just be on board with the fact that half of this book is Trisha either audibly telling stories to the daughter or writing, maybe through several communications. This is Trisha looking back on when she and her husband, newly married in the early 1960s, went to Saigon. And it's never made clear what his role was supposed to be. He was a consultant of some sort. He is an engineer. He went to the Colorado School of Mines and then became an attorney. And then he's asked to go to Saigon on assignment for, I don't know, a year or two. Trisha, completely naive, very, very young, meets Charlene, who is like this very experienced corporate spouse and has 3 children and is very easily living in these Western designed quarters in Saigon, which come with maids and servants. And that's weird. That's weird. It was weird for Trisha. And it's something that living in Saigon at that time that the Westerners have to get used to, even though they may not have that back in the US, because it's traditional, it's of the time, and it gives people, lower income people, employment. And it comes with the house that they're renting, the staff. Trisha is the kind of young, naive person that can be very easily swept up by Charlene, who's very well established in this circle of other US wives. And she ends up getting on board with some things that Charlene is doing, kind of philanthropically. I love the writing. I did start to wonder where it was going. Like, what happened in Saigon? What secrets are there? Am I not picking it up? And then the other part of the book is written by Charlene's daughter. Part 2. And I start reading this. I didn't understand at first that it was Charlene's daughter until you start reading it, and then you realize, oh, okay. The interesting thing about the daughter's part is that she's relating back to Trisha what her experience was in Saigon and what her experience was of her mother, who was, by all accounts, larger than life. Just the beautiful way that Alice McDermott makes choices about what is the purpose of Charlene's daughter, whose name I can't find anywhere. What part of her life is she sharing with Trisha, and why, is so interesting and so well done. I wasn't understanding why we were walking through the daughter's life from her growing up, coming back from Saigon, meeting the person that she's going to marry, having children, living in Baltimore. Like, I wasn't sure about any of that. I didn't understand where it was going. But then I found myself immersed in that story too. Again, if any of you have read Alice McDermott, like, I don't know if I'd ever try another one. If I'm not a person who looks for like a family saga book, but I find myself reading and enjoying them when I'm like blindly going into one. That's what's happened a few times. And it really happened with this one. I can't recommend it enough. It's not going to blow your mind. It's not going to have some like propulsive plot. The writing, I guess you could almost compare it to like a Tom Lake, where the writing is just so beautiful and so well done. It's beautifully executed. I was in very happy company when reading this book. All right, that's it. That's all I got. What am I reading now? I was in one of those reading funks after I finished all of these, and since I had just read this, I thought, well, I was at a place where I didn't have any library books that I was interested in. I wasn't going to go to the library for a couple days. I could have started one of those beautiful Henry James books that I just got. So I had to start looking at the stuff on my shelves. And I was looking specifically. I wanted another contemporary novel because I don't own that many. So I was looking at a few, and I just thought I would take a chance on the Jonathan Franzen that I have, because I've been meaning to try a Jonathan Franzen. And this one isn't quite as long as the others, I guess. And I don't actually think that it's one of his best, considered one of his best. It's called Freedom. It's just one that I found at a library sale. And I got hooked. Now I'm still hooked. I think it's a little too long. I mean, I feel like based on the number of pages, I could be reading Paul Murray. I could be reading The Bee Sting, but maybe not. If this was in hardback, it probably wouldn't be that long. Yeah, I got sucked in. I got completely sucked in. Who knows? I'll have more to say about that later. So we'll see what else I can get myself into. I'm just about to go to the library, and we'll see. Yeah, thanks for joining me, and please let me know about any of these authors. I would love your thoughts on any of them. Yeah, please join me in the conversation in the comments. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one.